Ready to go?
Aye.
No? Oh, just a moment. We'll be ready in a minute. Okay, let's go ahead and begin. We're within 30 seconds of starting. Is this okay with you, Dr. Mannon? Okie doke. I want to call the meeting back to order. We've been in closed session. Welcome to the guests that are here. Thank you for joining us this evening. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And if Mr. Nielsen will do that and come forward to the podium, we'd appreciate it.
Can I ask everyone to please stand? Put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we adopt the agenda. We do have a couple of things to report out of closed session. One of them has to do with the young man that you just saw. The Board of Education in closed session voted unanimously to approve the following administrative appointment effective January 22nd, 2020. That's Jeffrey Nielsen as the principal of Madrona Middle School. Yay! Jeff has served as acting principal at Madrona Middle School since August 2018. He previously served as assistant principal at Casimir Middle School from October 2016 to July 2018. He came to our district from Orville Wright Middle School, STEAM Magnet, in Los Angeles Unified School District, where he served as an instructional technology facilitator from August 2015 to October 2016, the intervention teacher advisor from September 2007 to June 2015, and the dean algebra teacher technology coordinator from 2007 to 2013. That's a lot of different functions, sir. He previously served as a 6th grade teacher at the International Bilingual School in Hsinchu Science Park, is that close? In Hsinchu, Taiwan, from August 2004 to June 2007, and a primary grade teacher at Florence Griffith Joyner Elementary School in LA Unified from August 2000 to June 2004. He received his Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the California Polytechnic State University at San Luis Obispo in 1999, and his Master of Education in Educational Leadership from the University of Idaho in 2006. We would like to congratulate Jeff. Welcome aboard as a permanent employee. Yay!
Thank you so much. Like Mrs. Reagan said, a year and a half ago, I was given the amazing opportunity to step in as interim principal at Madrona Middle School. And over the last year and a half, I've experienced firsthand what an incredible opportunity it really was. I just want to say thank you to both the board and the cabinet for all the support that I've received in the last 3.5 years in Torrance Unified. And I really look forward to continuing my work at Madrona Middle School with teachers and helping to ensure that all students are successful in their learning opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good luck. Say that again, Dr. Manning?
Jeff's family's here.
Oh, yes, Jeff, introduce your family while you're here, sure. He was going to have them help him with the pledge, but...
I don't know if anybody remembers, but 3.5 years ago when I was here, hired as assistant principal, I had the whole crew here. My parents were here, Aubrey's parents were here, my grandma was here. This time we kept it a little bit quieter. So this is my daughter, she's in 5th grade, Linnea.
Hi, Linnea. Welcome.
This is my son, Quaid. He's in 2nd grade. And my wife, Aubrey.
Hi, welcome.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for supporting him. I've had the chance to see him in action, actually, at his school, and it's interesting that almost whenever I go to campus, he's wearing some sort of a interesting costume or something to do with the day that's happening at the location. So He's really gotten into the spirit of things, and I know they love having him there. So thank you, and continue to have a great time there.
It's customary that you take your entire family out to an expensive dinner since we're all dressed up tonight and everything
Very
else.
expensive.
So you can leave right now if you want to, so you can get a little head start.
Or you can hang on if you like. You're going to go well. Oh, okay. Okay, I do have one more report out of closed session of one other item. The Board of Education, at its meeting of January 21st, 2020, in closed session, took action to accept the resignation of certificated employee case number 01-19/20 from employment with the Torrance Unified School District effective at the end of the workday on March 31st, 2020. The roll call vote was unanimous with 5 ayes. And that's the end of our closed session information. Bye, guys. Have a good dinner. Okay, so moving on, we do have staff presentations, and the first of those will be from School Services of California. And we will ask Michelle to come forward and give us the information she has to share.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm hoping we'll have a presentation coming up.
Oh, I should mention, by the way, that this is Michelle McKay Underwood, who has been actually with us from School Services for 3 or 4, maybe 5 years actually at this point, but that now she's actually a vice president. So she's moving up in that
right.
organization. So thanks for still joining us.
Well, thank you. And I don't have your title yet, but and don't tell my boss that I said yet.
Yet.
Well, thank you very much again for having me. It's my pleasure to tell you about the governor's budget. As you know, this is the first step in the process for the funds that will be coming to the Torrance Unified School District starting next fiscal year. So I'll tell you sort of some of our themes and sort of takeaways from the governor's budget. This is his second year that Governor Newsom has had the opportunity to present us with his spending plan. Last year we were very excited that he was going to be proposing to provide some relief, fiscal relief for school districts by proposing funding even outside of the Proposition 98 guarantee to deal with some of the significant cost burdens that school districts are facing. What we see this year is a little bit more of a tightening of his budget. We don't have that similar proposal, and what we see is some prudence in using one-time programs to buffer against potential downturns, either at the next big step in the governor's budget at the May revision, or potentially in the future. Now, these dollars aren't flexible dollars, and we'll talk about them, and they don't particularly help for the ongoing programs that school districts need to keep their programs running. But they all do have good goals, and his intention is to try and help support the core program of schools in these particular areas. We do see Governor Newsom continue to focus on early childhood education. That was a big part and component of his time as lieutenant governor, his campaign, and his first year, and we do see him creating or proposing a new department of early childhood development. But what we're going to be focusing on is the education budget. There are a lot of aspects to the budget, and the one obviously that is the most important for us is Proposition 98, which rules how much money goes into school districts and community colleges. Was intended to be a floor of funding when it was created, but unfortunately what we see year over year is the minimum is actually the maximum when it comes to how much money is being spent on K-14 education. What we see, I'm not going to get into all the details and nitty-gritty of Proposition 98, but as the state experiences declining enrollment, that puts us into a test 1 year when a certain portion, 38% of the state's budget is for education. Declining enrollment will be with us for the foreseeable future. LA County is experiencing a lot of that, but statewide we're seeing fewer births and folks leaving the state of California, and so that's an aspect that the state is going to be dealing with. for the most part, we see a local control funding formula proposal, a special education proposal, and not a lot of other flexible funding. What we see are particular pots of funds, which it seems to be buffering against future economic downturns. So just very briefly, Proposition 98, at several points in the year, the administration will go about sort of reconciling what is that minimum funding for the current year, for the past year, and then what do they expect that minimum funding level to be in the future. And so what we see is a continued increase in Proposition 98 funding of about $2.4 billion, the difference between this year and next year. So obviously continuing in the right direction. But when you look at how this compares to prior years, you see while there's been a lot of significant increases, it is starting to slow down. 2011-12 was really the bottom of school spending, school funding, as we were starting to come back out of the recession, and you see sort of makeup years as the state was putting money back in that they hadn't put in, weren't able to during the recession. Now that all that has been paid off, what we call maintenance factor, we're now at more of a normal growth of about $3 or so billion a year. When you look at all those funds going into education, the other thing to be aware of, some new information that was out of Legislative Analyst's Office, is how much is going into the pension costs. One of those fixed costs that school districts don't have any control over, that the state dictates, and about a fifth, when you look at the last 5 or so years, about a fifth of those increases are going to fund and make sure that the STRS and PERS retirement systems are whole for our teachers and our employees when they finish their career. So while the numbers are very positive, we have to remember that there's a lot of fixed costs within those for school districts. The big pot of funds continues to be the local control funding formula. Governor Newsom continues Governor Brown's legacy by funding the LCFF with a statutory cost of living adjustment. That is 2.29%. That number will definitely change, or is very likely to change between now and the May revision. There was a projection back in November that the cost of living adjustment would be 1.79%, so this is better than that. But districts were looking at and projecting from the Department of Finance a 3% cost of living adjustment for the coming year. So obviously 2.29% is better than 1.79%, but it is not as helpful as the 3% that districts were expecting and building into their budgets for the upcoming year. So that will need to be an adjustment that districts will be looking at.
So when you say it will change, the expectation is that it will increase rather than?
Well, that's unknown at this point.
Okay.
We think it will likely go in the positive direction. At this point, there are 2 more data points that need to be collected. 6 of the 8 data points have been collected, so there are 2 more that need to come to fruition, and that last data point will be available at the end of April. So just in time for the governor to make changes for the May revision and have that statutory cost of living adjustment calculated for then. So hopefully it'll continue to increase, but at this point we don't know. The LAO and the Department of Finance have spoken about sort of the differences between their 2 projections, and they don't have any concerns. It's just that the Department of Finance had the benefit of a couple more months of information than the LAO, just for timing. So what we have here is the per pupil rate for Torrance Unified, again based on those projected cost of living adjustments from the administration's Department of Finance. So last year, we were talking about the LCFF and special education as the 2 main components of the budget. We have a repeat again this year, LCFF and special education. It helps a little bit to understand how the money flowed out this year. This year, there was equity funding for those SELPAs and school districts that have historically lower per ADA amounts, including Torrance Unified. $152 million was provided to level up those lowest funded SELPAs SELPAs and school districts to at least that floor of the statewide target with $152 million. That was a good first step, and we hope that there will be continued progress for more special education funding. There was also nearly $500 million in one-time funds based on preschoolers with disabilities. So those preschoolers, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds that had been identified as a student with disability. So about $9,000 per pupil was sent out through that formula in the current year. What the administration proposes is to use those two pots of funds to supplement and increase the base funding for students with disabilities. So our special education dollars, what we commonly refer to as AB 602 funds. So those are the amounts that go out per ADA, per average daily attendance, and those rates vary significantly around the state just based on historical factors. The other part of the proposal is a continuation of that $493 million, but at a lower level, $250 million to go out based on preschoolers with disabilities, and we'll get into the details next. So again, for what we think of as the core special education funding, there's about $3 billion in that now, and those dollars will be combined with this $645 million to raise the rates of nearly every SELPA and school district in the state of California. Again, based on those historical rates that I mentioned, there's about 100 local educational agencies that have higher rates than what we're expecting, but it will be a significant amount of equity and what we call equalization for special education funding. The administration hasn't provided a per ADA estimate, but we estimate that that per ADA amount will be about $640 to $680 per ADA. For Torrance, which was just leveled up to $557 per ADA at the SELPA level, that's potentially another $100 per ADA going based on Torrance's ADA. So the SELPA structure remains in place during sort of this phase one and the allocation plans and those conversations among districts, but this would be a much more simplified formula. There's also a deficit that currently exists in special education funding of about 2 or 3% that doesn't ever go out to school districts. That would be wiped away. So there would be more of a dollar for dollar accounting for special education dollars. So the funding based on preschoolers with disabilities will be very similar to this year's, though to a lesser amount. Based on our estimates, it'd be about $4,500 or so per pupil with disability in that 3, 4, and 5-year-old range. Another difference between this year's dollars and what is being proposed is that the administration proposes to increase or improve services with those dollars. Now that is, of course, something that would be important in special education, to increase or improve services, but the problem or concern there is that the dollars are one-time. They continue to put these dollars out on a one-time basis, so rectifying those two concepts will be difficult if that's how the budget ends up being. Now, all these things, as we'll talk about in a second, are definitely subject to negotiation between the administration and the legislature. So the current year budget talked about making changes to special education funding practices to try and improve outcomes for students with disabilities. Over the fall, to that end, the Department of Finance, the administration, and legislative folks went out into the field to see how special education classes and programs were working. And so they found some universal truths likely that reflect the environment here in Torrance and outside that, one of the things that I think is most amazing is that outcomes for students with disabilities and students without disabilities improve when they're in inclusive environments. So inclusive environments is when a student with disabilities is in a general education classroom for at least 80% of the time. The federal government requires inclusive practices, and again, you see the outcomes are really improved for everyone involved. So these are some of the things that they noticed as they went out throughout the state to look at special education programs. And so what they want to continue to do is to continue looking at the SELPA governance structure, special education service delivery models, and again, trying to improve the outcomes for students with disabilities going forward with some additional work and study. So this is, again, as described by the governor's administration, step one, creating this new funding formula, but another new funding formula could just be a year or so away, looking to support equity, more inclusive practices, and early intervention services, so preschool and pre-identification of students with disabilities, as well as continuing to look at the outcomes of some work groups to try and integrate early childhood care into students with disability services. So those are really sort of the core funding, ongoing funding that the governor is proposing, the LCFF and special education. The next several slides will go through some one-time funds. This is how the governor is trying to address some of what he sees as some core issues for California schools. And what he's looking at is to really address what he sees as California's educator shortage. So we see $900 million in one-time programs in several different areas of workforce development, recruitment, and preparation, including the classified school employee credentialing program, which encourages classified staff to move into the credentialed service. So we see some of the high issue areas, the high need areas that Governor Newsom is proposing in the Educator Workforce Investment Grant Program. This would be for professional development in these areas, both for certificated and classified classified employees. And these would be competitive grants, so if Torrance were interested, these would be ones that they could potentially apply for. A lot of these programs, though, are concentrated for lower achieving schools, so potentially Torrance would either not be competitive or potentially not qualify to compete for some of these grants. Additional pots of funds for, again, some of the high-need subject areas. Several of these programs either were started in this year's budget or prior year budgets, and so it's really continuing some of those concepts to try and bring more folks into the educator workforce in California. Sort of a new concept and not necessarily related to the workforce development is $300 million, again, in one-time grants to compete to establish community schools for LEAs. So this would be for wraparound services, mental health services, potentially professional development in some of those social emotional issue areas, also increased family and community engagement. So for, if these were eligible for, or I should say if Torrance were eligible for some of these funds, which we'll need to see some of the details on, it would need to be a decision about whether one-time funds for these types of programs were right for your schools. $300 million I'm going to focus on here for opportunity grants. We don't have a lot of details here, but it does sound like they will be based on a formula for those schools and school districts that are lower achieving or in need of differentiated assistance based on their dashboard indicators. We got a little preview last year that Governor Newsom was going to be putting out some money in the area of computer science. So here I'll draw your attention to that first bullet, $15 million for LEAs to get grants to help 10,000 teachers earn computer science authorization on their credentials. That potentially helping to get more teachers authorized to and ready to teach computer science. In school nutrition, we do see some increased ongoing funds to increase the meal reimbursement rate. So that is that $60 million, as well as $10 million in one time for training school food service workers to focus on promoting healthier and more nutritious meals. In school facilities funding, for the most part, Governor Newsom highlighted the fact that Proposition 13 will be on the March 2020 ballot. So this is not the Prop 13 from the 1970s, but the new Prop 13 that looks to put a $9 billion bond before the voters, a $15 billion bond before the voters to decide whether community colleges, K-12, UC, and CSU need some additional funds. And we'll talk in a minute about how that is polling. There is a sale of some current funds under Proposition 51 that Governor Newsom is proposing, that $1.5 billion. So some of the things that we were hoping for and looking for and have seen in past budgets, but haven't seen this time or we're hoping we'd see. So no increased LCFF targets by Governor Newsom. Unfortunately, that's something that Torrance has been pursuing really since the LCFF was created, to look forward to what adequate funding looks like for education as opposed to just looking backwards to our high-level watermark in terms of funding in the past. While we do experience the benefit of the STRS and PERS funds in the current budget, $3 billion was used outside of Proposition 98 to help reduce those costs. We don't see any new proposals of funds there, and we also don't see one-time discretionary grants. That would be something that we would have expected from Governor Brown if he were sort of hedging against a potential downturn and wanting to use one-time money. He would have put it out in a discretionary manner. But Governor Newsom instead has proposed some specific grant programs. So this slide here shows you how much LCFF growth in revenues that Torrance would expect based on the Department of Finance out-year cost of living adjustments. Wanted to note that the data label on 2021-22 and 2022-23 have been updated here to reflect the latest Department of Finance cost of living adjustment projections. So 2.71% in 2021-22 and 2.82% in 2022-23. So it doesn't change any of that information. It's all still good, but it does reflect just the changing nature of those cost of living adjustment projections. So here you see all the things that contribute to the ongoing expenses for Torrance Unified to keep your programs running. The big question compared to the funds that you would expect under a COLA-only environment in the LCFF. The big question mark, that big open box, is the special education contribution, and those can vary significantly from year to year and district to district. But if some of those funds did come in for special education, that would be a significant help in that area. So just briefly, as I mentioned, this is the first step in terms of the state budget. The legislature will be thinking about what are their agenda items, continue to focus on early childhood education, the LCFF in terms of increasing base grant targets, as well as some other issue areas we'll talk about in a second, and then special education. The legislature has been very progressive in terms of seeking equity, so there's a lot less difference between the administration and the legislature in that area, but we will see their conversations start up in the next couple of weeks. Coming up in this legislative session are two bills related to the LCFF. Over the fall, summer and fall, the state auditor looked at 3 districts and their LCFF and LCAP practices, and as a result, Assemblymember Weber and Quirk Silva have introduced 2 bills, AB 1834 and AB 1835, looking at the use of supplemental and concentration grant dollars. AB 1835 would ask the state to create a standard accounting mechanism for those funds. Lots of districts have already created those accounting mechanisms locally, but this would create a standard mechanism. And then AB 1835 would restrict the use of supplemental concentration grant dollars in the out years. So if any extra dollars were resulted at the end of a year. Right now, school districts have the flexibility to use those dollars for any purpose, and this bill would require those dollars to continue to be used for supplemental and concentration grant purposes. So this is sort of the evolving conversation around the LCFF. The LCFF didn't make many changes, have many changes made to it under Governor Brown, but we're starting to see the legislature moving forward with making some changes. So while you haven't experienced the public safety power shutoffs here in Torrance, in other areas of the state, they've had multiple weeks of their classes disrupted or classes canceled. And so the state is sort of figuring out what should its role be in terms of these power safety shutoffs. Should there be regulations or laws around whether schools stay open or shut? At this point, we haven't seen legislation in that area, and we know that the counties are working on some guidance. to help districts through these situations. We know that the governor expects them to be more prevalent as opposed to less. So this will definitely be an issue area over the next couple of months and years. I have mentioned Proposition 13 coming up on the March 2020 ballot. This is the very latest polling. As a statewide initiative, it only needs 50% plus one voter to get the proposition approved. And the latest polling from this month has 53% of likely voters supporting Proposition 13 to provide additional school bond funds for education. That last bullet, high Democratic interest in the primary, will help this initiative. When you look at the details of these polling numbers, Democrats are the most likely to support the initiative, and that's why proponents were trying for this March 2020 ballot. They figured there'd still be a lot of interest in the Democratic primary. Lots of folks would turn out and get this initiative passed. So its polling is pretty solid, above 50%. The other initiative that we're following is the Schools and Communities First initiative. This would make changes to the existing Proposition 13 regarding property taxes for commercial and industrial properties, making some changes in those areas. This one is not polling as well. It currently polls at 46%, and we've seen it under the 50% mark for the last several polls. So they'll need to get some folks into the yes column between now and November 2020. Again, this would be a 50% vote plus one. The other initiative that was being discussed for a couple of months out in the education world was the Full and Fair Funding Initiative, sponsored by the school boards and the Association of California School Administrators. They have elected, instead of competing head-to-head with the Schools and Community First initiative in November of 2020, that they will not be moving forward with that election. They will likely be targeting the November 2022 election instead. So just sort of the closing thoughts. Governor Newsom continues to fund the LCFF, but he is not taking strides to make significant improvements to it. He is making some changes in terms of the LCAP and some transparency, but is really just sort of checking the box in terms of LCFF funding with the cost of living adjustment, and then really focusing his attention elsewhere in new initiatives that he thinks will help to move education in the right direction, but don't provide the resources for core programs that school districts like Torrance will be dealing with over the next couple of years. The other thing that's sort of interesting at this point in negotiations, there's often a more simple proposal from the governor, and by the end we see many more additional programs after negotiations. So it'll be interesting to have that as sort of a starting point now with many of the programs that we might expect at the end of the process instead of at the beginning of it. As I mentioned, this is the beginning of the process, not the end of it. Governor Newsom will have already presented his budget to the legislature. We'll get all the details on that proposal at the beginning of February. Then the legislature will start examining it, start talking about their own versions of special education reform or of teacher workforce preparation. The May revision is the next big step in the process, when we'll know that final cost of living adjustment. We'll have an idea if revenues are coming in better or worse, and then they'll all be wrapped up by June 15th, when the legislature needs to have that budget to the governor for his signature to start the next fiscal year. We've seen, I think my closing comment is we've seen under Governor Brown, there was a lot of consistency between the governor's budget and the May revision and the final budget. We saw less so that consistency of Governor Newsom for the first year, so it'll be interesting to continue to watch his evolution as governor in the education area. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
And that's it for Michelle. Anybody have any questions, comments? On the dais, anybody in the audience? Any questions? Okay, well, that was very complete. We really appreciate all of the information, and we'll take it to heart as things progress and we look at our budget and financial picture. And we release you too. I don't know if an expensive dinner is in the offing, but I think you get to go home.
We'll have the best that LAX has to offer.
There you go. Thank you so much. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
Castle's Hamburger Place, right as you go up at Southwest, is supposed to be really good.
White Castle.
There you
It was
go.
in K-Town before.
Recommendation.
Castle's, it's so good. Yeah, so.
But feel free if you need to go, Michelle, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on in our agenda. Thank you to the kids and to folks who have been here to tolerate that, but she needs to get on a plane to head back to Northern California, so needed to be first on our list of things here tonight. Next, we will have a report from the Torrance Education Foundation from the new Executive Director, Sharina Sonlo. Come on up.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Shireen Osanlo. I'm the Executive Director for the Torrance Education Foundation, and I'm here to give TEF updates. So first on the list is our South Bay Lakers event, which we'll be having this Saturday, January 25th, at their El Segundo facility. Doors open at 1 p.m. The game starts at 2 p.m. and we are sold out. So thank you so much to everyone in the district for purchasing tickets for the event. We're really excited to have that. Because we are sold out, the organization has offered us a pair of courtside VIP tickets, which we are selling for $250. We still have those courtside VIP tickets available, so if anybody would like to attend and sit right in the front, there are 2 tickets right in the front. You can purchase them on our website, tef4kids.org/events. Next, currently we have a Jersey Mike's fundraiser that is currently going on. It's this week. It started today. It'll go until January 26th at the Jersey Mike's on Hawthorne Boulevard. You will get a free sub with a sub card, which Shelley has, and she is going to be distributing to the cabinet and to the board, as well as I will leave a few sub cards as well here on the table for anyone in the audience if they'd like to purchase or grab some if they want to go. You'll get a free sub if you make a minimum of a $2 donation to the Ed Foundation when you go to the Jersey Mike's. You just show them your card and then make your $2 or more donation and you'll get a free sub. So it's for this week. We're really grateful for that opportunity.
So that's essentially a sub for $2. Or
Essentially,
or
yes.
more if you
Or
choose
more
to.
if you feel very
to give
generous.
more. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, yes. And then currently we have our car raffle, which is currently taking place. Each of the school ambassadors have already received their packets, and they've done a great job of already communicating and distributing that to their school. We have our group turn-in dates coming up. Our first one is Wednesday, February 5th, from 3:30 to 5:30 at the Torrance Education Foundation offices. And then our last group turn-in date will be March 4th, from 3:30 to 5:30 as well. People can purchase tickets additionally after that. We will do our drawing at our annual event on March 26th, but for group turn-ins, it will be those 2 dates. And that's for our car raffle.
And what is the car that is being raffled this year?
It is a 2020 Lexus NX 300. It's a hybrid, so it's the same SUV that was raffled last year. And there's more information on our website if you would like to see that. And that transitions us into our annual fundraising event, which is coming up. It'll be on Thursday, March 26th at 6 p.m. at Robinson Helicopter. It'll be our annual fundraising event. It'll be a great evening. We'll have entertainment, silent and live auction, and all the proceeds that we raise will go, back to the district. So we hope that we can get as much support as possible for our event coming up. Invitations will go out within the next week or so, so look for those in the mail. And lastly, I will be visiting all TUSD schools within an upcoming couple of weeks, doing site visits, meeting with the principals as well as the PTA president. So I'm really excited to be on campus to visit all of the schools and meet individually with them to see what their individual needs are, since all of our schools are very different. And I would like to also thank Dr. Mannon, Dr. Stowe, Dr. Crumpy, Mr. Mara, and Ms. Khan. I've met with each of them individually, and they've been so amazing with my transition to the Education Foundation. So I just wanted to send a thank you out there as well. So thank you so much, and have a great night.
Okay, thank you. Welcome aboard. Anybody have any questions or comments? If you need any raffle tickets, or actually, we should get those sub.
Yeah, the sub cards will be going
cards for
around,
sure.
and I'll leave some for the audience in the front, so make sure you grab some. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We do have.
I have a question. Can you buy the raffle tickets online, or do you have to do it in person?
Yes, no. You have to either purchase your raffle tickets by mailing them in person, or you can call in. Or we cannot sell raffle tickets online.
Okay.
But you can call in.
Okay.
Mrs. Reagan's will have more than enough.
Yes, actually, I don't have any in my possession now, but I think I will be getting some perhaps at our
After
meeting
Thursday.
coming up, so.
After Thursday, okay.
Yes. But on our website, you can always print out the raffle form, and then you can either mail it in, or you could just call our office, and then either someone in the office will answer the phone, and we could take the raffle purchase over the phone.
Or there's also ambassadors at every
Yes.
school, and actually multiple organizations that are probably selling at every school also.
Exactly.
So you can make sure they get credit for selling the tickets that way, too.
Definitely.
I picked some up at the kickoff.
Oh,
I have a couple-
great.
I have a couple of books.
Ah, there's somebody waiting
They're good
next
purchase
to
tickets.
I've already sold half of mine.
Yes, thank you.
Can you take credit card if we call the office?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
we could take credit card.
As compared to like local places, you can't take credit cards, so.
Yes, we could take credit card, cash, check.
Thank you.
We take
They'll
all of
take
the
what-
above.
Bitcoins, whatever you got.
Thank you.
I don't know about Bitcoin. That's going down.
Thanks, Shereen. Okay, moving on, we're going to go forward with our student representative.
What happened to PTA?
Oh, I'm sorry, Denise, oh, I'm so sorry. Torrance Council of PTAs, Denise Spellman.
Hello, hello, hello. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes.
Excuse my voice, I'm getting over something right now. So I'd like to say thank you to Girl Scouts Troop 4345, their leader Patty Nishimura, and Torrance High School student Erin Kaku, who organized a coat drive, and they delivered 8 high boxes
Wow.
of coats to be donated for Project Hope to distribution for the families in Torrance Unified School District. Also, Journey of Faith has also donated jackets and clothing as well, so we can get those out to those families. We delivered 25 food boxes for the Christmas break, along with personal hygiene items, diapers, wipes, and other miscellaneous items for our foster care and homeless families and students. And also a reminder that the College and Career Fair is coming up on February 22nd, and that'll be hosted at North High School from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. There'll be representatives there from many trade schools, colleges, universities, armed forces, and there'll also be several workshops there available. So check our website out for any updated information on our calendar events, and that's it.
Do you want to mention the donating for seniors from Project Hope?
Yes, on our website, we do have a link. If you wish to donate to a graduating senior, there is a link that you can pay through the PTA, Torrance Council PTA web store. And those funds would go to those students that are the seniors that, items that are not paid for by the district or the school, then to give them basically a good, send off for their senior year, help pay for like grad night. It pays for us to buy prom dresses for the graduating senior girls, tux rentals for the boys, transportation if needed, prom tickets, and other miscellaneous. So items that are not, caps and gowns we know that the district pays for and everything. There's some events that the school might help out, but, there are things that the seniors may not be fortunate enough to get. And so by sponsoring a senior at whichever, you have the option to choose which high school you would like to donate to, or if not, then you can just go ahead and just click other or like that, and then we make sure that the money goes towards those seniors who are requesting to participate in events that are not paid for by the school or by the district.
And those seniors are all homeless or foster youth?
Yes, this is part of the Project Hope, the McKinney-Vento students, so.
Yeah. So
All right.
really worthwhile.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
any
you.
other questions, comments? PTA things? Okey doke, thanks. I didn't mean to run over you, so thank you for being here. Now we move on to the report by the student representative. And Dr. Egan, will you introduce him for one last time?
I will, yes. Thank you, Mrs. Reagans. It's my pleasure to introduce for his last evening of being here as our student representative, and I want to personally thank Jordan for joining us these past couple of months and representing West High School. So I'd like to introduce Jordan Yee, West High ASB President, who's going to share some news from his school.
All right, thank you. Sorry, my voice may be a little off too, because I'm coming down with something, which is great because it's finals week, so great timing. All right, so good evening, and to start off from an ASB standpoint, it's always a goal of ours to encourage a lot of school spirit at West. So right now, the majority of the things we're doing is planning events for the spring that are all involving school spirits, whether it be the upcoming rally or the class competitions. In the past, we've now done a lot more student sections of the winter sports, so the basketball games. We're working on cultivating a better atmosphere. And of course, with that comes finals week, so we're doing a lot of different finals encouragement events and different handouts for that. We have our Multicultural Day Assembly coming up in February, where we're going to showcase the various cultures that are held from West High through different performances. And I think I mentioned it on the first meeting, where it's a personal goal of mine to really involve West High more in the community and have a better impact on the community. So the first phase of that kind of came on this last Friday. We had a donation day at the West vs. South basketball game. It was a home game, and we raised money for a children's cancer cause, and we raised over $300. So it's a good start to what we want to do, and we're going to keep going, and we're currently in the process of planning more donation days and hopefully a larger event to even have more of an impact. Within the athletics and extracurriculars world, we had the winter dance concert, which was titled Don't Wait to Be Great, and from what you hear, it was very successful. The basketball, soccer, and girls water polo have all been in season, and this Saturday we have the annual Athletic Booster Club Pancake Breakfast. And lastly, school-wide, we have our West High Talent Show auditions, which we held at January 15th, so we have our talent show coming up. And we also have a school-wide assembly on addictions and life goal setting, which is going to be given by Rocky Hearn, who is a DEA agent, and that'll be February 3rd. And I believe that concludes my report.
That's everything. Last chance. These are your last words for in front of us.
Yep,
So.
I believe that is all I have to report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, since this is your last evening here with us, I want to let you know that, first of all, that lovely name plaque in front of you gets to go with you, so you can take that. But I also have a certificate of recognition, so I'm going to come down and do that.
And thank you. I think it's finals week right now, right?
Yes.
Thank you for being here tonight. I hope you got all your studies down.
Good luck in finals.
We kept you longer than necessary, so come out here. I want to read it to you. So we have the certificate of recognition to Jordan Yee for South High School. Student representative to the Board of Ed. It says South High School on here. I just noticed that as I was reading it. It's like, oops, wait a minute, this is the wrong high school. We will correct that, I promise you. As a student representative to the Board of Education for the second quarter, 2019-2020. All the rest of that's correct, given the 21st of January, 2020. So I will hand this to you, but then I will take it back because we have to correct it, okay? So thank you for being with us. And Tammy, do you want a picture even though we are, yeah, we, come on out here. Oops. Oops. Until I started reading it, it's like, oops. I know you were just talking about West. Of course. Okay, I'll take it now and then we'll get it to you, okay? We know you went to West. You're going to West. Oh, well. Oh, well. Okay. And now, moving on to another set of students who are here to,
Sorry,
Yeah.
if I could just interject.
Sure,
I was just going to ask if we could dismiss Jordan.
Oh,
He's
yes,
not feeling well,
absolutely.
and
yes,
he has some
yes,
finals
please.
to prepare for, so, yeah.
Please. He probably doesn't have anything to study. He's probably already ready for everything. But yes, absolutely.
Don't forget the name badge now.
Oh, yes.
That's important.
Yes.
Thank you, Jordan.
A
Thanks.
gift of high
Take care.
perceived value.
Good luck. You don't know where you're going to college, do you?
Not yet.
Okay.
Hearing back soon.
Okay, soon. All right, take care. All right, now moving on to our next set of students who are here and who have tolerated being with us this entire evening. We have our good news student presentations, and for that, we go to Dr. Kim.
Thank you, President Reagans. It's my pleasure to introduce three fine young men from three of our great elementary schools. To start us off, from Hickory Elementary School, can Jack Lohman please come on up to the microphone? Let's give Jack a round of applause. Also here tonight is the principal of Hickory Elementary School, Mrs. Maggie Mayberry, and the assistant principal, Sung-Hee Kim. Thanks for being here. Jack, what's happening at Hickory?
Good evening, school board, Dr. Mannon, cabinet, and community members. My name is Jack Lohman. I am a fourth grader at Hickory Elementary School, and I would like to tell you just about the few amazing things happening at Hickory School. I would like to, Hickory School this year, we are very lucky to be practicing with with our counselors, Miss Weiss and Miss Nava, on our second steps lessons. Each week, our first and fourth graders will learn about different ways to learn about social, emotional learning. We learn about different ways we can be successful inside and outside the classroom. We have learned strategies for how to be mindful of other people's perspectives. This program helps us achieve our goal each day to be a hound. H, help others. O, own your actions. U, use a positive attitude. N, navigate your future. And D, do your best. Some of the things we Hickory Hounds are looking forward to are the 4th and 5th grade basketball lunch tournament, space night, family math night, STEAM fair, and our student showcase event.
Thank you.
And that's it. All
That
right.
was impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Very nice.
Next, from Torrance Elementary, is a student leader named Lou Borda. Lou, please come on up. Let's give Lou a round of applause, everybody. And also joining us tonight is the principal of Torrance Elementary, Dr. Kelly Joseph. Lou, please tell us what's happening at your school.
Okay, so thank you, and there's this one program that we do for after school called the High Achiever Enrichment Program. It is run by teachers Miss Frank and Miss Bloom. It is an after-school session to inspire us to be creative and using STEAM principles. In the first session, we're giving 5 problems to solve for a person stranded on a deserted island. First, we had to try to survive a windy night. So we had to build a shelter out of paper that had to withstand a hairdryer blow. Second, we had to find food. We had to build a bridge across a river of hungry alligators to get fruits for the night. Next, we had to survive a pirate attack. We had to build a catapult with a range of 1 foot. Then we had to contact the outside world, so we had to make something like a message in a bottle that wouldn't get wet when it was in the water. Finally, we had to find a way to leave the island. We built a boat that had to float and sail out to sea. It was cool to be able to find different solutions to the problems and experiment with different materials. I'm very lucky to be at Torrance Elementary. Thank you.
Very nice. It sounds like a course in MacGyver. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Lou. I'm glad you got off the island. All right.
He didn't say if he did, actually. Did you make it off? You survived. Okay, cool.
And thirdly is our student leader from Wood Elementary School, Chapman Hurley. Chapman, please come on up. Let's give him a round of applause. Also joining us tonight is the principal of Wood Elementary School, Dr. Sean Johnson. So Chapman, please tell us what's happening at Wood Elementary.
Hello and good evening. My name is Chapman Hurley and I'll be sharing about Howard Wood Elementary School's Tableau. The Tableau is a 5th grade event held in the spring where each 5th grade student gets to choose a historical figure and make them come to life for other Wood students and parents. 5th graders will be able to pick historical figures we have learned about throughout this year. We dress up as an historical figure and take a pose representing something the person is known for, like Ben Franklin holding a kite. We will have to memorize a quote that the historical figure once said. I've seen many tableaus in my time as a woodchuck. My 2 older brothers pose as Ethan Allen and Alexander Hamilton in the tableau, and I look forward to being part of this great wood tradition as well.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation, gentlemen. Actually, just to put a sort of a bug in your ear, invite us when you're doing these wonderful things, when you're doing the tableaus. Let us know so we can come and see it now that we know it's going to be happening. Okay? And now, gentlemen, we appreciate you having sat with us this long, but we do want you to go ahead and go on home and study all of that information that you've been missing out on this evening and get your homework done, et cetera, et cetera. So
Can we give them a note and just get them off of homework for tonight?
No, I don't think so.
The principals are here. They've been here till, 8 o'clock. I think they should get a pass. And maybe ice cream tomorrow.
You can negotiate that, Mr.
Okay, yes.
Lee.
I'll send a note with you.
But thanks for being with us. Appreciate it. Uh-oh, there goes our whole audience. Sorry, guys.
I like your sneakers. I love it.
I think Mrs. Hahn needs to stay to the end.
She's sneaking out too, I see her. Okay, thanks for all you folks for being here. We are going to move on to our next presentation, which is the Torrance Unified School District Academic Dashboard Information 2019-2020. And I think that's Dr. Krempe.
Yes, thank you. I am going to start out this morning, or this evening, when am I doing this, with a couple of just quick demographic slides. Our demographics and population of students have remained very constant over the past 3-4 years, with the only major difference being a slight dip in enrollment. With our socioeconomic status, we're about at a third of our students are low income. About 15% of our students are English learners, and a growing, even though 0.4 doesn't seem like a lot, a growing foster youth population. In total, over 80% of our students make up Hispanic, Asian, and white students in our district, and that has also remained very constant over the past couple of years. So, on to the dashboard. As you know, we receive our academic performance measures through state indicators and local indicators. You've approved and had presentations on our local indicators tonight, prior. So tonight we're going to focus on the new released state dashboard and indicators. The quick, and I could be done just at the end of this, is that we're doing really well. And you can see all the pretty colors up here that of the 6 areas of state indicators, we are in the green and blue, which is good. Those are the highest 2 categories, and those are the colors that we want to be on. Now, in all seriousness, we'll go through kind of each one and give you a little bit more information. First off is our English language arts. We are in the green. We continue to move up. We're moving up just a little bit. I think an interesting note, kind of some new information this year, is we would need to move up by 10 points to move up to the blue. So it kind of lets us know, while we have remained in the green since the dashboard first came out, we still have some strides to make to move up academically in the blue with our students. Also, what you notice on this slide are 13 different demographics. Those are our student populations. And you can also notice then how they were doing on our English language arts performance. You'll notice one white area. And so that is our American Indian Native Alaskan students, that we do not have 30 students in that subgroup for this specific assessment, and that's why that we don't have a color for that group of students. And you'll see that on a number of slides.
You have a question on that slide? Question. So if we're 10 points away from, if we're 10 points away from blue, how many points are we away from yellow?
We're quite substantially away from yellow.
Okay.
So one of the questions, if you look at, well, and it actually kind of tells you 38.1 points, we are above standard.
Okay, so standard is yellow. Okay.
And so we're not going to drop though, but we could drop quite substantially. Now actually, if I rephrase that, we are 38.1 points above standard in the status. We actually could stay high and drop enough and go down to yellow and still be very high. Because the dashboard is made up of status, which is how well we're doing, and the change. And you're actually going to see that on a suspension slide, and maybe that'll be clear in a second. In mathematics, very similar. We're in the green, we've gone up. Actually, in reviewing last year's presentation, this almost seems like a very identical slide. We've doubled the progress in math over English language arts, which is what we've been trying to do. We have a gap between our performance overall in our language arts and our math. And so we are trying to bridge that gap, and we have really been focusing on our math achievement, but we don't want to have that achievement or the gap narrow by our English language arts scores going down. So our English is going up, our math is going up even more. That's every year we're kind of chipping away at the gap between our English language arts and our math achievement. Mr. Gerson is laughing at me. This is a new slide this year, and you won't see a color. This is our English learner progress, the new LPAC assessment. If we were going to have a color, it would be green. Our status is high in that year, but because there's not a change yet, we need another year of tests to see how we did. If we increased or decreased, we will not have a color yet. We have to make a substantial growth there. For 191 more of our students would have to have improved in their English language access for us to move up to the very high or blue category. So I know, Mr. Hahn, you're asking how much before we drop, but we don't want to think of it that way. We only want to go up. Chronic absenteeism, and I also want to just kind of note as I'm going through these quickly, there's colors of all the demographic subgroups that we're going to kind of talk about at the end. But that one still remains white, no color yet for that. We've declined, which is good for chronic absenteeism, but still have work to do. 4.3% of our students are chronically absent, meaning that they are absent 10% of the school year, which is 18 or more days. And so we are still working on how we can work with these families and get these kiddos to school. Kindergarten continues to be one of our highest absentee rate grade levels. Yes. Suspension rate, and this is, Mr. Hahn, maybe that'll help you a little bit. This is also in the green. We've declined, but by 0.1%. So one could kind of argue we didn't really improve a whole lot, but yet this color was yellow last year. So if it makes sense, last year, we still were low in our suspension rate, with 2.2% of our students suspended on average. That is a very low rate across the state. So even last year, that is still a low rate. It should have been green. But we increased in our suspensions enough last year to where it moved us to the yellow, even though we were low overall. So interestingly, how we declined 0.1%, yet it moved us back into the green because we continue to have not a lot of students absent. Also to note that we now have a color there.
Yes.
So this is the one data point that incorporates every single student in our district. So this is a K-12 rate, where the English language arts and math are grades 3 through 8 and 11. Even chronic absenteeism is only K-8. It's only K-8. So this is the one that you will see a color across the board. If a student was enrolled in our school for just one day and suspended, they count here.
And that's the first red.
It is, and we will discuss that. We will discuss that at the end. Yes. Graduation rate, I know when Michelle was talking about our budget and talked about some of the low performance and how we don't qualify for a lot of our funding, we're kind of in an argument around some of the mental health monies, and they look at the blue graduation rate and tell us that we don't need help. So this is the one data point that a lot of the mental health funding with that workforce investment works with, and we're in the blue. Now that we have two subgroups that don't have, because this is only seniors, so this is last year's senior group. College and career indicator, very similar. We're in the green. We can go up. This is one we're really going after. 132 more students are college and career ready. We will be in the blue, and we are working very hard to ensure that we will be in the blue. So we're working hard on this one. I've mentioned it as we go, but how did we change since last year? A lot are the same. But we did have those two yellows in chronic absenteeism and suspension, so we've moved those both up. You may remember through a lot of our focus group and LCAP work really targeted in on those two areas, so we're pleased with those results. Hot off the press, literally last Thursday, are our new science scores. For our first attempt, we have 48% of our students meeting or exceeding the standard, and which is a lot higher than our math and English language arts scores when we first gave our test. In fact, it's higher than our math and English language arts scores now in meeting and exceeding the standard. So we do not know yet, and we're not satisfied, but we do not know yet where we compare with local schools, the county or the state. This is new. That other data is still, it's not even embargoed, it's not available. I haven't seen it yet. But I wanted to give you this as a point. I was mentioning to Dr. Mannon today, the one thing that's really interesting when we compare this graph to some of our other scores is the very low rate of not meeting the standard. Only 6%. That's unusual in our, we usually have a 18, 20%. So we do have a huge number of students who are approaching the standard. And so as long as they're close to meeting the standard, the fact that only 6% are not meeting, I think, is a very promising first attempt at this. Lastly on this is a little bit of a wonky assessment. Kids take this in the 5th grade, but it's the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade standards. All of our other assessments, you learn the material in the grade, you get tested in the grade, not in science. So in 5th grade, in 8th grade, and it covers the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade standards. And those are new, by the way, and we're teaching them in an integrated way, so it's very new and different. And the high school is even, if wonkier is a word, because the high school, you take it one time when you're done with science. So we have to kind of guess and predict, and a lot of teacher discussions and counselor discussions, whether or not you're done at your 10th grade year, which is when your grad requirements are done, or you take 3 years of science. But we do have seniors who we think they're taking 4 years of science. They sign up for 4 years of science, so we don't give them their assessment. Then they drop the class, and we actually have to assess them when they haven't had science for an entire year at the end of their senior year. So it is kind of a little different kind of a test, so we're going to get more information, and I'll get back to you.
It's because of those elementary school science labs.
Well, I will say that the elementary science, it mirrors more closely our math scores, where the elementary science scores are higher than the middle school, and then our high school scores are the worst. So it does closely mirror where our English language arts scores, our lowest score is 3rd grade, and our highest score is 11th grade. And in math, it's completely opposite of that. The science seems to mirror that, the math. So we'll get back with more information as we get it. Where do we go? Where are we?
Was that your question, Mr. Lee? Oh, just an observation? Okay.
Yeah. So where do we compare as a district? Just kind of an aggregate, we're a 4.2. You can see there that where California and Los Angeles are, 2.9 and 3.3 respectively. So we're doing well compared to state and county averages. Also, kind of a new comparison is similar schools data. So they've kind of looked and identified 48 schools districts that are of similar school demographic and unduplicated, meaning low income English learner count. And we are at least in the top 6 of those 48, in all of them where we are number 1 in grad weight, chronic absenteeism, and suspension rate. So kind of a new thing to keep an eye on. And schools also receive the same report and are very interested in who their comparative schools are and kind of looking at this. Couple last slides. Which of our student groups need some support? The orange, and Mrs. Reagan's talked about the one red, these are our foster youth. And I want to remind you, so we're looking individually by student. Our grad rate, we had 4 foster youth students last year. Every single one of our foster youth students graduated. This foster youth count is because of South Bay High School adding into our dashboard, and every single one of those are wards of the court and are foster youth, and there's no getting rid of it so far. And so we want to make sure that we're following all of our foster youth students, and schools actually have homework I'm going to talk about on our last slide. That they are bringing the data for any foster student that they have. So far this year, we have suspended 0 foster students. We suspended 3 last year. So we are really watching them closely, but the reason that this data looks like this is because of South Bay High School. We do have district schools that we're also helping out. You can kind of see here where suspension and chronic absenteeism, 2 of our areas that we're still working on and have improved, we still have a lot of schools that are attempting to get out of the orange. But I did note that we had 10 sites exit orange in suspension rate last year. That was a long, long list. You probably couldn't even read it because we probably had to make it in 5-point font to make it fit on the slide. And also 5 additional sites have exited in chronic absenteeism and have done a really good job. I think our schools have done a good job of working with their parents and their leadership teams at coming up with strategies on how to help. Finally, what are the next steps? Schools have homework. Principals are coming back to us throughout February with taking their school data and looking at their single plans and coming up with what adjustments that they have to make and what recommendations do they have for things that we need to do in our LCAP planning, because that's what we're starting to do. And this is why this comes to you in January on a longer presentation evening. We have to get going on our LCAP. So sites are in turn having these conversations with their faculty, their PTAs, their school site council, LMACs. We're doing the same with our district committees. In fact, the district communication committee, a parent member from each school site council comes Thursday for our DCC meeting, and then they're gonna come together and work with us, and we go from there.
Okay, Mr. Hahn.
Couple questions, just for clarification. I'm trying to understand this dashboard a little bit better. So earlier you mentioned how on the math, it's very similar to the science, right? So we're less than 50% standards met, but yet we're green. How is that possible? We don't meet standard, but yet we're green.
So the state has determined algorithmically what percent of students that are above standard. And it's a scaled score. So we get a point for, they've kind of zeroed it out in the middle of yellow, and then how many points were above and below. And meeting, exceeding automatically means college and career ready. So they're very high levels. To be able to meet the standard every year is a high level. It's not a basic level. Yellow is a basic level of approaching a standard and being close. And so I know, but generally,
so can you be blue and not meet standard? Can you be blue and not be 50% standard? That's just that dashboard sounds weird to me.
We'd have to move up another 10 points.
So I'm just saying, but is it possible to be blue and yet be 50% below meeting standard?
I think that'd be tough. I think we need to get into the 60s.
Okay, and so, but you could be green and yet not meet standard.
And be right at 50.
Or below 50.
Well, now
below
remember,
50 we're green.
Or have a huge increase.
We are talking meeting and exceeding, okay? So the dashboard is different. Meeting, exceeding is the old way that we measured. You had to get over the high jump bar or you knocked it down.
Okay.
This is every student improving from year to year over where they were the year before. So if they were not meeting the standard before by 100 points, and now they're not meeting the standard by 50 points. That's a 50-point improvement that the district and that school gets credit for, even though they're still far below in the standard.
Okay.
Progress model.
Oh, so the dashboard's a progress model?
Individual.
Okay. So that's what basically comes down to. Like you're saying, like you can see the progression of the student itself. Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
It sounds like the old API scores, because we were, years ago, we were like in the 600s and 700s, and then by the time it ended, most of the schools were over 800
over 800.
because it was kind of an aspirational kind of.
We will continue to grow. I think the difference there, though, is that it was proficient or bust. So if you were below basic or far below basic, there wasn't as much of an attempt to work with some of these students. Some of the districts really worked with bubble kids, and that's not what we need to do. All means all, and we need to work with every student to help them improve and achieve at their best levels.
Just out of curiosity then, is it possible, like, for example, we have all these STEM grants, right, with like refinery, they give out grants to teachers. Now, when the teachers create these grants, is it just random ideas that they have that they want to pursue, or are these projects that are like lined up with our standards? Like, it would be nice if we can have, like, kind of give a guideline to these grants, saying, hey, if you do a grant.
So both the refinery grants are standards-based, and they have to address a standard at the refinery ones that go individually to teachers. The TEF grants are a little bit different because they're STEM related, but they're based, there's a different focus there, so they're not competing with each other. Like, you see a lot of parent STEM nights and a lot of after-school supplemental robotics and coding clubs and that kind of thing versus the teacher grants for in-classroom activities. But they're absolutely, and there's a committee of people, including our science resource teachers, who score them based on that.
Okay. Great information to have, and in general, as you said, we're doing pretty well. There's always room for improvement.
We're like Lake Wobegon. Every kid's above average.
We want them, every kid to be above average.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you very much.
Garrison Keillor fans.
Yeah, I remember what the rest of that line says, too. Next, we'll move on to the audit presentation by the Certified Public Accountant from Nigro and Nigro. Come on forward.
Thank you, Ms. Reagan. So, I'm going to introduce Michael Klein. You have five reports that he will briefly discuss. The TUSD general budget, and then each of the four bond measures, Y, Z, T, and U. So, Michael?
All right, well, good evening, members of the board. Thanks for having me. I tried to pose as Peter, but he is quite a bit taller than me, so I don't think it'll work too well, so I'll just admit I'm not him.
Thank you for sitting with us, by the way. I know it's taken an hour to get to this point, so we're glad you're still here with us and still can pose as someone else. Thanks.
All right, so I'll try to make it brief. I know you've got a long meeting ahead of you. So I'll start with the district's main, audit report for the district. And so I'll just highlight a few things. So our audit process, three main parts. We get an understanding of the district, the policies and procedures. We test transactions ranging from deposits and receipts to disbursements, payables, personnel, and payroll, and also the accounting systems. From there, we'll note anything that are opportunities for strengthening the internal controls at the district, and that helps us design further procedures for the second part of our tests, which are financial account balances, which we come out after the books are closed, audit the financial account balances, ensuring that they're fairly stated, and then finally we also perform tests of compliance. So that includes federal and state compliance. So this year we tested, I believe, 3 major federal programs in this year's audit. And as far as, so that's the three main areas, a couple key financial highlights. From what I could see, there wasn't a lot of significant change in terms of overall revenue and expense. They increased commensurately, so you had about the same net loss of about 9 to 10 million that in your statement of activities that you had the year prior. The entire state's facing declining enrollment, so that's something you already heard about earlier. And then also structurally, you've got the problem of increasing pension costs, which tend to decrease net position overall for our district. So nothing really red flag there. As far as findings go, there was one finding. So I do want to mention that, most boards, they want just a little bit more information on that. And it related to the student activity funds. And I believe this was,
Once again.
yeah, I believe this was, as you pointed out, a repeat finding from last year. So it addresses some new areas, but ranging from disbursements to cash receipts and also delivery of goods to some homes. So we did note that, and that was our only finding. So we didn't find any other federal compliance or state compliance findings. That was our one finding there. So we have listed out what we saw and also the responses of the district to that. The most important thing, too, is that you've got an unqualified opinion, so we were able to state that these financials are fairly stated, didn't have any huge gaps in information in order to substantiate what is presented here in the financial statements. So any questions on that portion?
Anybody? Questions, comments?
All right.
Just a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
On the one finding, what do we do on the student, like, is there?
Oh, we've tried many things, haven't we?
Concern, what does that mean? Like,
Well, no, I mean, we work with the schools on making sure that they have the proper controls and procedures in place. And it's a constant thing when you're dealing with ASBs and the number of, individuals that are turning in receipts and, all the different programs and the volume that they manage there. I think overall, our schools do a very good job, and we've done over the years a number of training and in accounting and procedural ways in which to make sure that they're handling things properly. We'll continue to enforce
We can
that.
solve it if we want to centralize it, which would then make everything grind to a halt, and nothing would happen. So, for the 12 years I've been up here, we've talked about it 12 times. And we have incrementally gotten better.
Yeah, I was going to say, and to our credit, there always are alterations that are made and attempts to address whatever the specific issue is. And sometimes it helps, and sometimes we fall back into the same patterns, but we're working on it.
Well, 2 years ago, we did require that all principals, any school that had an ASB, so this could have been, we even have some middle schools and elementary schools that have ASBs, but, I mean, you think of high schools. We required that all of the principals and any administrator who oversees activities, as well as the activities director and the accountant in the student activities office, go to a FICMAT training up in Palos Verdes. They hosted it, and so we made sure that at least at a minimum, everybody was getting the same information, the correct information directly from FICMAT. So, and that's the accounting guide that we require them all to do or to use in their procedures. And so we found that was very effective in establishing that conversation to make sure that we are standardizing practice and that we are aware of the challenges they face at schools, but also that they need to follow these procedures. And we don't believe there's any malice going on. It's just some of the findings that are there. We just want to correct them and make sure that everybody's protecting themselves, really.
So out of curiosity, has this been every year that we have the same issue on the audit? Because it's my second time, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's very consistent across the state. with ASBs, and it's not always the same school or the same, kind of thing, but just, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions, and so when they sample things and find a few things that we can improve, we do it.
Right, but my question is, though, is that if this is gone every year, I don't see how we're improving it. If it's the same issue every year, we're not correcting it. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if this audit report, for example, if I get audited, I want to correct it. I don't want to see the same audit issue the year after, because that means I'm not really addressing the audit concern. Am I correct on that?
Right, and I think Michael can address that from that standpoint, but we do. There are different things that happen, different issues that they find, and I don't know if you want to speak any more to that.
Yeah, I don't know the history beyond last year. I do see that there was a finding last year for ASB. What a finding means is that we call it a significant deficiency. So we've included a management letter which includes some other deficiencies, which there's only a few there to point out. But what I will say is the problem with ASBs is not isolated to this district. We see it across many districts, as that was mentioned. And a lot of that's due to the decentralization. And what I find is best is just gaining the buy-in and additional training of these, of the people at each of those sites. And it's a difficult thing to do. Yeah, but from what I see, it's kind of it has been a consistent weakness here. So.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much. We do have those reports under administrative consent items, if anybody wants to look at them, so they're there. Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to our last but certainly not least staff presentation, proposal for mass notification system, and that's Mr. Mara.
I'm waiting all day for this.
Oh, he said it sounds Orwellian up here.
Orwellian.
Yes.
Thank you, President Reagans. So what I want to propose to you today is a mass notification system, or in my day, we just called it the old PA system. So really, this is the evolution of a PA system with a lot more bells and whistles and sounds and blinky lights. Okay, so I'm going to go through the proposal, and afterwards, I'm sure you'll have no questions. So what are the outcomes? Some of your concerns earlier from a few meetings ago were that there were inconsistencies in the way folks that were on campus were alerted to an emergency. So what we would like to see after this system is put into place is an integrated communication system. So we'd like to provide some audio and visual alerts in all the classrooms, workspaces, outdoor spaces. We'd have to put the system in your cafeterias, multi-purpose rooms, even in our new spaces like our performing arts centers or our gyms. And then standardize the alerts across the schools, right? What does it mean to be standard across the schools? So we'd like to see that happen. And then allow for easily manageable bells and clocks for the sites. Right now, each of the sites has different ways of managing their clocks. Some it's really easy. They log on to kind of an antiquated website. Some they do it a little manually or very manually. And it'll allow for good internal and external communication. And then the system has to be flexible enough and expandable enough to meet our future needs. So what I'm going to show you is kind of like the first phase. This is going to be a big project, and it'll go across 2-3 years till we finally get to that point where we're comfortable that we're at the point where we're securing this safety of our students and the folks on campus. So our current status is we've got these outdated analog bogan systems, and we probably saw these systems. It's the little brown speaker that sits in the classroom. We've probably seen this when we were in school. And that's where the Charlie Brown teacher talks through, right? That's that one. Yeah, whatever her name is. Some of our schools don't have outdoor paging. So there's an issue there when you're trying to get an announcement out and you can't get sound to a field or inside some of the corridors. Some schools have them, some schools don't. And then there's the inconsistency between the emergency bells and the tones. So we received some of the protocols from the schools, and I was glancing through them. I noticed that at one particular school, short bells means shelter in place. At another school, the short bell meant evacuate. Okay, so, and the long bell, and I remember that from school, the long bell always seemed to be all clear, right? So there was an all clear. Not that that's bad, as long as everyone at that school knows that that's what that short bell means at that particular school, but it may be different at another school, but make sure your poster is correct, right, that you're following it correctly. So when we say inconsistent, I'm not saying that it's horrible, but I think getting a consistent system across the board in all the schools would be a huge benefit to all of our employees, even as they move from one campus to another. And also, we don't have visual alerts, right? So if you have those who are sight impaired or hearing impaired even, we need audio and visual alerts. New systems now also have mobile options. When I say mobile options, I'm talking about apps for the most part, and I can go into that a little more if you want to talk about that. And then the ability to automate, and that's probably going to be in the next phase, okay? So this is hard to see, but what we want to do is leverage our current investment. As you know, we put in a new phone system a couple years ago, and we're using Cisco. We have Cisco phones, and the platform Single Wire. So Single Wire is kind of the background software that runs the platform, and Single Wire allows us to make announcements through the speakers on the phones now. So we've got that in place, okay? So by using Cisco and Single Wire, we can choose what is our trigger message. So if you look at the graphic, and this is an Informacast product, you can manually, right, you can manually set a trigger, right, saying that there's an alert or there's an intruder, and the principal and administrator or key designee can manually send the trigger, and then that trigger itself would hit a certain target. So the target may be a laptop, a cell phone, a wall speaker with the flasher, right, strobe light, or even a caller announcement, right, a word crawler in there. So that would be the first, I'd say, first phase, and at least getting the simple things out of the way. Identify the emergency or the event, figure out a protocol, right? What's the process for setting the trigger, who will send the trigger, and then what devices or which group of folks or which area, all right, needs to get that trigger. If you look closer into the graphic, it can get really complex. Down at the bottom, the automated section, that's why this shouldn't be part of the first phase. You see that there's earthquake alerts, gunshot detection, a couple other things that can automatically send this system into an automatic workflow where a human doesn't have to intercede, right? So if I hear a gunshot, right, or the system hears a gunshot, who should know that? Should I get a text message, Dr. Stowe, right? Who should get the text message? Who should be alerted? Should TPD be alerted, right? So again, when I said building a platform that's future-ready, that's the future part of the system. Right now, we need to get the basics put in, which is literally installing across the board a new IP clock. So these new clocks, and they're being put in tons. We're not going to be new to this. The Paramount Unified, San Diego Unified, they've all got these, a bunch of districts. We were over at Irvine Unified, and they have these clocks in all of their classrooms. So now these clocks have a built-in microphone, a strobe light, and they're LED, so it's got a message crawler. We determine what color should the alert be, what should it say, who manages that messaging. right? So locating these places in strategic areas, pretty much every space that you've got a person in there. When we were at Irvine Unified, we saw a clock in a copy machine room. Like, why is this here? Because a person may be here. When the doors are closed, they can't hear anything. So you have to have, so it almost seemed like overkill, but when you really think about it, it's not, because a person may be there and they may be out of earshot of an alarm that's out in the hallway. And I got the little image of the cell phone there. Single Wire has, and there's an app for that, right? So if you've got a principal or even a staff assistant, no longer has to be tied to their phone, because normally we're thinking, well, what if they're running, or what if they're hiding or evading? They're not near their desk phone, but usually they've got their mobile device, and then they can trigger an alert through the system. And then we'll want to get some outdoor speakers. That's what the icon there is for the outdoor speakers. And then we'll need to design and configure these notification standards, and we're going to need quite a few people to figure out, right? Because this side is the technology side. It's fairly easy to put out an RFP, design the specs, get a contractor in here, bring some Ethernet cable, wire the clocks, everything in there. But really, the most important piece is aligning the technology and all the features with our emergency plans and the best practices at the schools. Right? That's what we really, really need to do. That's going to be the most important part after we develop all of the specs. And we believe we can get the RFP written up in the next few weeks and possibly awarded by hopefully this July, and get to work this summer. This is a lot of intense work inside the classroom, so I can't imagine us doing this during the school calendar days. And we'll have to probably put it towards our, off times, holidays, next summer. That's why the project could take a couple years. And then we also have other projects that are ongoing this coming summer with our new fiber upgrade and some Measure T technology projects, like handing out laptops to all of our teachers, because those are coming in too. And then all funded through Measure T is what we're hoping to use as far as our funding source. So that's it in a nutshell.
So the alert is a visual alert, or it's an auditory alert, or?
Both. And it's whatever we want it to be, right? And it could be depending on the event itself, right? A fire alarm, I think we know what we're going to hear, because after the modernization, we're required to have a fire alarm. So we'll know what a fire alarm is. Whether or not we really need to trigger a fire alarm, we can get it to show red. Red is fire, okay? If that's what we decide, then that's what we'll do. Does blue mean shelter in place with a strobe? How many tones should that be? Again, going through, we'll have to almost start from the beginning, from scratch, because the schools have evolved with their processes and their practices differently, and mainly because their technology may have changed from year to year. We may have to, we're kind of like starting over and say, all right, now that we've got this great new technology in place, what should we do with this? What is our process now? And there are really good plans at each of the schools. I'm not saying throw them all out. We're going to take most of them and say, this is what works here, but we want to also give enough flexibility to the school so that here's our base standard, here are our base colors, our tones, our alerts, here are the 4 or 5 events, and how do we program that? What are we going to program for this?
So my other question was that you mentioned putting the speakers outdoors. How will you determine where to position those outdoors to cover the campus?
That'll be through the RFP method.
An engineer.
Yeah. I actually walked Yukon last Friday with a contractor to get a feel for it. It's a lot of speakers.
I was going to say that too.
And Yukon's a tiny school. My kids went there, and I didn't know they didn't have outdoor speakers. So as we walked, he goes, well, this corridor, you'll need it here and here, and because you've got to cover this area. and here's the playground. You'll need here and here. They're pretty loud, so you don't need everywhere, but you need to hit the right spots. And then they've got that parking lot, and I forgot about there's the basketball court there, so we'll get one on the new science building, easiest place to put one. So yeah, it'll have to be determined by the contractor.
It will be just a couple comments. It'll be a project where it'll be school by school, because each of the schools is different, and then we're going to standardize the method or the message that Gil was talking about with that. Now, the good thing is, and what I needed to clarify from the slide, this would not be funded out of the last issuance, which we just did out of Measure T. This would be out of the Measure T safety and security funds that we approved. And if you'll recall, and I'll take you back just a few months ago, whenever I did the presentation on Measure T surplus, I indicated there was actually more dollars in Measure T, but I didn't bring them to you. And that's about $3 million, because I was holding it at the time for Mr. Mara then to take, because he was already working on this concept. And so there is $3 million that can be allocated for this out of the original Measure T issuance, which actually would be the last safety and security project, quite frankly, out of that. But what Mr. Mara is doing is basically giving you a concept tonight. This isn't really a proposal. We'll do, as he indicated, an RFP, and then you'll get it back before the board in an actual contract that will be out in the future. But, Mrs. Liu brought up the inconsistency. She was absolutely right about those inconsistencies. But to really solve the problem, we're doing it sort of piecemeal now with some signs and some other things school sites are doing. But to really take care of the issue, we'll need to go to this. And then we can really resolve the bigger issue.
So one more question about the outdoor speakers is how will they be vandalism protected?
I don't think he can answer that until a contract
Well,
comes.
that's something to put into certainly.
Absolutely right. But I think the other side is when you really are dealing in the project itself, and you have a real project, and you have a real contractor, and you're absolutely right. You bring that up. One of the concerns, because I heard it, one of the concerns that we originally had when we were talking about putting in 1,200 video cameras, well, people are going to vandalize them. We haven't had any of them vandalized, quite frankly. So
That's because they know they're being recorded.
And that could very well be. But remember, they'd be being recorded if they tried to vandalize a speaker.
That's true.
So, we have it the other way also with that. But that clearly is an issue, though, that would have to be brought up to the contractor and whoever the engineering firm is that would be working on that. That's a good issue.
Mr. Gerson, you had some questions?
Mr. Mara, thank you. In fact, I'm excited about it. I'm glad to hear about the integration between what we currently have, like with our phone system. Because there's so many different hardware products out there, have you narrowed down which ones you like, or is this still open?
We kind of narrowed it down with the particular speaker. There are two manufacturers that are kind of in the market, your best of breed. So there's a couple of them. I've talked to a couple of friends out in the, Irvine uses Atlas speakers. Nawak Murata uses A&D. So.
But we still need to go to an.
Yeah, we would still. Yeah.
But the clock system then hasn't been determined yet. You just have a few ideas of. Okay.
Right.
Mr. Marr knows what some other districts are utilizing.
Yeah.
Utilizing effectively.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments? Interesting concept. And I don't think of it as being Orwellian. I think it's important and really serious to have that capability on our campuses.
Depends on who gets on the microphone in the school.
But, I remember first going onto a campus in 1992, there were not even telephones in the rooms.
That's true.
So, I mean.
Were there telephones fit, well, no, I'm not going to go there.
I don't know what that question was going to be, mister. But, so there used to be no method to communicate, even on campus, let alone in terms of emergency, et cetera, et cetera. So we're vastly beyond that, at least, so.
I didn't have a phone in my first classroom in 1990, so.
Yeah, see? Yeah. And what if you had needed someone to be there and,
You send a runner to the office,
Yeah,
right?
that's what we did.
if you can.
That is what we did.
Yeah, if you can, yeah. Mrs. Lou?
Mr. Mara, thank you so much for what you've done. When I initially brought it up, I was more concerned about consistency in bells, rings, and tones, but you've gone further than what we've asked, and so this is wonderful to utilize all this. So great job so far.
Yeah,
Let
we
us know
have
if there's
started.
anything.
It'll work out really well.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. More to be seen. We will look forward to, work as we go down the road. Okay, we're moving on to a couple of public hearings that we are going to have this evening. First has to do with the public hearing and board's initial response to the CSEA Chapter 19 initial proposal for 2019-2020. The CSEA Chapter 19 initial proposal for 2019-2020 was submitted at the regular meeting of the Board of Education held on December 16th, 2019. Copies of the proposal have been available in the city libraries and the Human Resources Department for review by the public. A public hearing will be held on the CSEA Chapter 19 initial proposal for 2019-2020 at this time. Is there any public comment related to the CSEA Chapter 19 initial proposal for 2019-2020? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. The board looks forward to the continuation of cooperative good faith contract negotiations with CSEA Chapter 19. The board's initial response is to refer the CSEA Chapter 19 initial proposal for 2019-2020 to the board's representative for negotiations. And our second public hearing has to do with the board's initial response to the Torrance Unified School District initial proposal to CSEA Chapter 19 for 2019-2020. The Torrance Unified School District initial proposal to CSEA Chapter 19 for 2019-2020 was submitted at the regular meeting of the Board of Education held on December 16th, 2019. Copies of the proposal have been available in the city libraries and the Human Resources Department for review by the public. A public hearing will be held on the Torrance Unified School District initial proposal to CSEA Chapter 19 for the 2019-2020 at this time. Is there any public comment related to the Torrance Unified School District initial proposal for 2019-2020? Seeing none, we will close this public hearing. The Board of Education looks forward to the continuation of cooperative good faith contract negotiations with CSEA Chapter 19. The board's initial response is to refer the Torrance Unified School District initial proposal to CSEA Chapter 19 for the 2020, to the board's representative for negotiations. And moving on through our agenda, we do have someone who wanted to speak in unscheduled hearings, and he has stayed with us this entire evening. The Board of Education welcomes input from the public in order to discuss district business in an orderly manner for the privacy and safety of the speakers and to help staff respond more directly. The board policies require that public presentations to the board comply with certain procedures, including speakers to non-agenda items may address only items that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Time allotted for such presentations is limited to 3 minutes. Total time allotted for public input on non-agenda items is limited to 30 minutes. A speaker may not relinquish his or her time to another. When addressing the board, speakers are requested to state their name, address the president from the podium, and adhere to the applicable time limits. Complaints against employees or students will normally be heard in closed session, and the district's complaint procedure should be followed before discussion with the board. The board may remove disruptive individuals and order the room cleared if necessary. Any person who willfully disturbs any public school meeting is guilty of a misdemeanor, Ed Code 32210. And we have here for unscheduled hearings, Mr. James Henry, who would like to speak with us. Come on forward. Thanks for hanging out with us.
School Board President, members of the school board, my name is James Henry, graduate of North Torrance High School, longtime North Torrance resident. I noticed under a closed session discussion of real property, namely the Hamilton Adult School and more importantly, the North Torrance Girls softball fields, with potential leasers which may lease the property through applicable laws. I hope you pointed out to these potential leasers that the property has to be first rezoned by the City of Torrance before any construction takes place. I also want to point out a possible conflict of interest, since the president of and CEO of the City of Torrance Chamber of Commerce and Ms. Donna Duporian, I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Duporian.
Okay. Was on the 7-Eleven committee and voted in favor of the property as being surplus and therefore making it possible for the TUSD to sell or lease the property. Lastly, I didn't know that the TUSD was running at a deficit and needed to sell the property or lease the existing property to stay solvent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. And thanks for your persistence in staying with us this evening. Okay, we have no discussion action items this evening, but we do have a significant consent agenda. How shall we approach it? Anybody have any items
I will
to?
make a motion to approve all of it except for 13.5, which I would like to pull.
Okay, so you,
18.6.
so you would like to pull 13.5, 18.6. Okay. And
I also wanted 13.5 pulled as well as 15.2.
2. Okay. Anybody else?
Okay, I will make a motion to approve all the consent calendar except for 13.5, 15.2, and 18.6.
Second.
Okay, well, it's been moved and seconded that we approve all items except for the 3 that have been pulled individually. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Let's see, 13.5. Let's see, Mr. Lee, I think you asked for that one first.
Yeah, elections now seem to go on for like 4 or 5 decades, but no, but I mean, as far as the voting process, this is over a number of days at our school sites. Before, it was just one day. It's kind of in and out, pretty easy. What, do we anticipate disruptions with this? This just seems like it's going to be, I want to participate in democracy and I want to help democracy, but this seems to be a little onerous.
So my office has been working with the state, or with the county registrar recorder for probably 5 to 6 months, since the summer when they came out and evaluated all of our sites for technology, infrastructure, whether or not, these voting stations could access high-speed internet, ADA accessibility to the campuses. And so, once they did that assessment, they sent a request for different sites to be used. And we've been, it's been 3 or 4 months kind of hammering out the details of the operational side of what is this going to look like. And yes, it used to be one day in the cafeteria or, another space on the campus. Now it's 4. So part of the deal is with the county is they've agreed to reimburse us the cost of any overtime that we incur What they had originally offered $300 a day, and when I calculated it out, it's closer to $500 a day that is going to cost us to have custodial staff there, other supervisory staff, and then during the school hours, what the county's calling a line monitor. This would be someone, it could be a campus security, could be our noon duty supervisors, another classified employee we would basically be hiring to escort the voters to and from whatever location is on their campus, or monitor the entrance to the school. Like, for example, Bertlin has a campus where their cafeteria opens up to the street. So we would station someone there where they'd be in the caf and just monitoring, make sure that people that are there voting aren't going onto the campus. And so each school looks a little differently with regard to how this will actually play out at the sites. But all the principals have agreed to this, and we have 17 schools that will be 4-day vote centers. We have 2 schools, Hull and Levy, which is the adult school, that are going to be 11-day vote centers. And, in working with the other local school districts, we had a conference call with the head of the registrar recorder at the county back in October-ish, and went through a lot of our concerns and worked through them over the course of time. And so the way we see it is we were always vote centers. We always had people on our campuses for previous elections. They're asking for a few more sites, a few more days. They're compensating us for this. We were able to work out some of these logistics, and in all honesty, it's a trial that, again, that all the local school districts and I have had conversations with this. We've extensive conversations with the county, and let's see how it goes, and then we work through the bugs and kinks to for the November election. And so it is quite a bit of work on the part of our principals and others here at the district office. Sandy Toronto, my assistant, has kind of borne the brunt of all these communications with the county, and so we're really kind of just seeing how it's going to go, and getting the feedback from the sites on this to make sure that whatever we agree to moving forward in November, that we can address any future concerns.
It falls in that category that my old government teacher at Torrance High, Jim Armstrong, said. Democracy isn't cheap. So, okay, just curious, And
at $500 per day, per site, the county's realizing that democracy is not cheap.
Yes, and this is their, other people's brilliant ideas. So, good, okay, just curious, that was all. Thank you.
I asked questions too, because I was actually concerned about the security of our campuses. Now that we have all of our pieces in place, that we're kind of breaching that on our own accord, or at least on the voting public's accord. So didn't want to make sure we lost all of that security, so. Mr. Gerson?
No, that was what I wanted to ask more about, the security. I know we've always been voting centers, but we were a voting center for 1 day, not for 11 days. Things have changed. We lock our campuses, people come on, we scan their IDs and run them through databases. We can't ask any of these people for their IDs if they're voting. That's a violation of their voting rights. So I wanted you to talk to safety concerns, because I am concerned about these people having access to our campus, because it's going to be unlocked during that time period at some point.
Well, we won't be unlocked during school day, and that's when we'll have these line monitors to be able to escort if the cafeteria is in the middle of the campus, for example, and that's where they're going to be voting. We'll have people wait in the office, and they'll take them to the cafeteria, and then they'll wait there till they vote and bring them back, escort them off campus. So we've tried to address all these concerns. Again, we have agreed to it, and a lot of the local school districts we were all in the same boat, because many of them use Raptor as well, and they have similar concerns, and in meeting with the county, in getting them to agree to compensate us for this additional staff, the cost of staff that we would incur, at least we feel that the county was working with us in that regard, and they were under pressure to get secure vote centers.
Yep.
And the intention is to escort voters back and forth.
Yep.
If
Correct.
they're entering our campus rather than coming in and out an external.
Yes.
The rest of the camp is not going to be open.
Yes.
But my question really comes then on the security issue is on the, so at like Hall, when we did it, is my concern was always at 3 o'clock, because the voting center is still open, kids are coming out, it's chaos. So I don't know how in the world they're going to monitor people coming in. You don't monitor people coming in and out, it's just pure random, the kids are coming out, people getting picked up, people are all over the place. So my question is, how do you secure that? I don't know how you secure that.
Well, that's no different on a voting day or not a voting day. Just any day, our campuses are open at the end of school. And I know Dr. Mannon has talked about the beginning and the end of the day as vulnerable for incidents of violence.
Right, but this is different, though. You're inviting this possibility by having the voting center there. If it's there just because it's there is one thing. But it's another thing when you're inviting a person to operate on our campuses, because now you're inviting more possibilities. If that's removed, you're right, if any other day is like that, right? Mm-hmm. But we're not inviting these people to say, hey, you know what, we're not inviting 500 people, 1,000 people to come, on that day to the school campus. Do you see the difference?
Well, the idea, I believe in speaking with the county, that it's available more days, more locations, weekends, so that it's not a big rush of people on a particular day, that it's spread out. You can go to any vote center in the county, so it doesn't have to necessarily be your local school or city property. I think that in reading newspaper articles as well as about the vote center, within LA County, of course, that they're trying to not have as many people at a location on a particular day, just by extending the hours. So that's, again, we've always, many of our schools have been voting centers for many years. My understanding is they're no longer allowing people to use their garages as polling places, and because of ADA access and other kinds of things. So that we're looking more for public venues.
You're going to have to just monitor the people.
You just have to watch.
They're going to need to come to a certain point, and then they're going to be needed to escort it, and then they're going to vote, and then you're going to escort them back out to that central point and back off the campus. I don't know there's another way, unless Dr. Stowe's conversations have been something else. I don't know that there's any other way to do that.
But I think those kind of campuses should be closed off. Like, if it's in the middle of the campus, like, you just say not to that school. We'll open other schools, but not this school. I don't know why we have to cater, like, schools where you got to escort them from the office to that building, escort them back. That makes no sense to me. I say those kind of schools should be closed off. Now, for example, Hall, the gym is outside of everything. The gym is locked out. So you go in and out of the gym. There's no escort. There's no line monitor. You go in, you come out.
Well, you'd monitor them inside, though.
Inside,
Yeah, you still have to make sure they don't enter campus.
Yeah, I'm just saying that back door's locked. I'm just saying whatever.
Exactly.
But I'm saying, but you're not taking someone. I'm not taking them to the NPR from the office to the NPR and vote and then come back out. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that makes no sense to me.
I do, but I don't know how many sites there will be that will actually.
Well, I know for a fact that they did not select all the sites that they evaluated, because I was at a site that was being evaluated, and it's not on the list.
Right.
So they did not select all of the sites they did look at. So that, and I don't know what their selection process was, or what the criteria was. But
I couldn't tell you.
yeah. Mr. Lee, did you have something?
Yeah, one last thing. Clearly, we're going to do it this year. We're going to monitor it this March, and I think it's probably the right thing to do. I don't really agree with what the state did as far as elections in this rotation, but that's what you get when you have nothing but Democrats up there. But anyway, it's great.
Excuse me. Whoa, that was not.
I'm just teasing you. I'm just being funny. That doesn't mean anything, just being funny.
I recommend for
But
everyone
anyway.
to vote by mail. Lessen the confusion and.
But here's the question is, let's say we have a problem. Let's say it is a hassle. Let's say it is a disruption. Let's say it's more than what we want. Can we look at the county and say, nah, we're not doing this?
I mean, in the middle of the process this year?
No, for November. Can we turn around and say, we're not going to be able, I mean, obviously, we're committed to March, but can we look at the county and go,
I think the answer is the board can do that.
Sure.
We could bring that to you, and the board could say no.
then why don't we do this? Why don't we have, like Sandy needs more to do, but why don't, when this is all done, do a post assessment of what it was, where it worked, where it didn't work, what it looked like, and bring it back to the board, and then we can decide whether we want to do this.
And then you would get, and should you decide not to, then you can notify the county.
Yeah.
The board would take action, we would notify the county of the board's action.
Oh, that'll be fun. Okay, good, yeah. I mean, that's probably the best way to do it, so bring it back, before we have to commit in November, and let's see what it looks like, and if it works well, then, yeah, we're a good partner in democracy. If it doesn't work well, it's not really in our chart of work.
Okay.
Yeah, I had planned to do a full assessment of this anyway, just in speaking with the principals, gathering information. I want to know how many people are voting at each place and having the schools keep track of that, at least during the hours that we're open on that Monday, Tuesday. But definitely we'll bring that back.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay. Did anybody else have any other comments? Mr. Carson, you looked like you...
I do. I understand the Los Angeles County Register Recorder's Office and their mandate. They have to get people to vote. That's their job. Our mandate is to keep children safe. I see a conflict here. I don't know if I can support it now. I don't know if I can wait for an accident. We did everything right recently, and a person penetrated school at drop-off with parents. Teacher noticed right away. Person was off campus, less than 60 seconds, and yet it's still a huge issue. Things can happen so fast. So my mandate to protect children conflicts with their mandate. I don't know if I can support it now.
Are we getting a certificate of insurance, and they assuming all liability for everything?
Yes, the agreement has a indemnity clause, and we have insurance.
It's the standard.
You could request a sheriff deputy at every location. Well, we'll talk about
All
that
right.
for November.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second? Anybody? I'll second.
Second.
Ooh, this will be fun.
So there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Good.
Abstain?
Abstain.
Well,
So it's 3-1 and 1.
Yeah, 3-1-1.
that would have been,
Okay, next
Then we
item,
report it to the county.
15.2. Approval of secondary school study trips?
It's really quick. I just wanted we are approving item number 3, Health Occupation Students of America, not HE4ALTH, Occupation Students of America. It's just, before we approve it, I just wanted to point out the correct name that we're approving.
Oh. So, so
I'll
you
make-
want to alter what it says in the item, actually?
It's just a fat finger error.
Yeah, I think it's
The
just
E
a
and
typo.
the 4 got hit when someone was pushing the E key.
Okay, just that there's a typo.
Yes, small typo.
Okay, so motion and second?
I move that we approve item 15.2 with that fix.
Second.
second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With that correction. And then we have 18.6. That was,
Me.
Oh.
Just a quick question on that. What do we use hop, skip, and drive for? I don't know.
I know.
Oh.
I just
Yeah,
heard
this
today
this
at
is
the building
the,
office.
it's actually a contract we have with the county.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
I just don't know
Dr.
what it was
Crumpy
for.
can address it.
So this is a new one. There's a new law that requires transportation of foster youth. So that they may continue in their existing schools regardless of where their foster parent might live. And so this is for 2 specific children that do not live in the city, but DCFS, recognizing this distance, has agreed to split the cost with us. So it's actually a 50/50 transportation cost.
Just for those 2 students?
For those 2 students while they remain in foster care with the current family.
Okay.
So there's continuity. That's a good idea.
That's good. I like that. Okay. I just want to make sure. I wasn't sure what it was for. Thank you.
Motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, I just wanted to add that they talked about it actually at Building Bridges today, and many districts use that service in particular because they have additional clearances and assurances that the drivers are responsible and taking care of the kids in the best possible way, so they utilize those. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so moving on, that's it for the consent items. There is an extensive board calendar. Please check it out and see the things that are coming up for our students in our schools. And a Williams reporting requirements, you can check that out and see if there have been any, which there haven't in this quarter. And moving on to the report from the board's representative to SoCal Rock, and that is Mr. Hahn this year.
So it was my first meeting at SoCal Rock. And so I want to thank President Reagan's, because she actually came there just to make sure I got there safely. So she forgot to make sure I knew where I was going.
Introduce you.
Yeah, and I
Make sure
really
you knew
appreciate
where
it. That was really nice of her,
everything
that
was.
she actually was there to make sure that I got there and everything worked out. So I really appreciate it, 'cause I didn't know what room it was. So that's really nice. That's really nice of her to take that time to do that. And so it was a great meeting. I'm looking forward, they just approved that Ambassador High School will be using the site. And I think that's going to be a huge win-win for SoCal Rock as well as for Ambassador. I think it's a great joint agreement. There were some stipulations from the previous board meeting that they were able to resolve, and that's going forward. They also approved PBNet. I was trying to email Katie about this before, but it didn't go through. I don't know, I couldn't get a signal out there, but PBNet was approved during that board meeting as well. And so those were probably the 2 big items. But again, the whole funding formula for them is going to be a big factor. I think it's a factor that they're trying to work through. But Dr. Hilaire has been working ideas with school districts, trying to get more school districts to come and use the services there, like Compton Unified, they came and visited. And so there are a lot of good ideas. And so it was a great first impression for me. I really enjoyed the diversity as well as seeing the new ideas and to see the progression going forward. So it looked very promising in terms of the ideas that they established. So that's pretty much it.
Good. I just wanted to know did they tell you when the school services final report was going to be shared?
So it's going to be shared at the end of February. It had to get postponed because the school services could not come at the next board meeting, so we had to postpone the board meeting just to accommodate school services.
Oh, so you changed the date of the board meeting?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, because to accommodate school services to be there.
Okay. Well, yeah, we should talk about that, because that's like the 3rd postponement, maybe the 4th postponement of them
Yes.
actually presenting, so
Yes.
interesting. Okay.
But we have a date, though, so it's
All
good to
right.
go.
I'll get that from you. Okay, other comments from board members? Anyone?
It's orals, right?
Yeah. Is Lou?
Okay, a couple months ago, President Reagan and I met with Miss Lily Trujillo, if I pronounce her name right. She's the founder of Street Racing Kills, and I've heard of this program before, and what it does is bring awareness to teenagers, and specifically to teenagers and their parents, about automobile accidents and what that's about. Automobile accidents are actually the #1 causes of accidental death for teenagers. And I want to commend North High School, who's going to have a program on this, and encourage all students and parents to attend the the seminar or the presentation when that happens. Ms. Trujillo herself, I mean, she's really widely known that her daughter is a victim of street raising kills, and it's a horrible story, but one that could affect any one of us. Her daughter was not driving. Her daughter is not the type who would normally be in a car of people who street race or anything like that. So that I want to bring up and encourage everyone to go. Second item I want to bring up, that I want to just notify you guys of is, I'm sorry, not notify, but I want to commend also the West High Science Olympiad for going to the Golden Gate Science Olympiad regional competition at UC Berkeley later on next month. Congratulations to West High for being able to make it there, and also best of luck to you. Another thing I want to bring up is I'm actually very impressed that there is a presentation or assembly of cybersecurity for students of Towers Elementary School. Cybersecurity and safety involves preventing and responding to online crimes, bullying, which is a big issue that's growing nowadays, teen drug abuse, and assessing threats. It's my hope that other elementary schools will be putting on programs like this to start from let the kids learn about this and give them better habits so that they will not be a victim of this in the future. But it's great that it's starting out in elementary school, so thank you for doing that. And lastly, I just want to mention that we had a resolution to proclaim January 30th to be of 2020 this year for Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution. For those who don't know, Fred Korematsu was one of the survivors of what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II. And I'm specifically referring to the Japanese internment camps. I'm friends with the attorney who represented Fred Korematsu, and I want to emphasize how important this is in terms of all of us, no matter what party we belong to. The civil liberties are quite important, and I do hope that no one...
Humor.
Yeah, humor. That no one will ever impose or that this horrific period of our history will ever be repeated again. So I'm glad to hear that also that Fred Korematsu is mentioned in a lot of history books nowadays, so that students can be aware of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gerson.
Are you going to respond to Mr. Henry in your comment to set
No,
it?
when you have
No?
unscheduled hearings,
Okay.
it's, you're not to be responding.
Can't respond to it.
Unless it's closed session.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a lot of emails this week, mostly around SCA QMD, which I'm sure we'll talk about that quite a bit in the future. But one of the other emails I got was from a senior at one of our high schools, and so we got into a little conversation. It's something that's been brought up here a few times by parents, and so I asked Isaiah if I could share with you what he was telling me. So he wanted to share with us his experiences and thoughts about homework, especially now as he's studying for finals. And he said that he spends about 3 hours a day on homework, but he also reflected on a time where he had 3 projects all due at the same time, which kept him up very late for several nights. In lieu of homework, he wishes that he could spend more time with family and friends, as well as practicing coding and programming. He asks that homework be optional or for extra credit, and so he says, and I quote, "I believe that if homework was a form of extra credit instead of a mandatory thing, then students would be way more inclined to complete it. In that scenario, completing your homework would do nothing but improve your grade and your knowledge on the topic. And if a student was too burnt out or overwhelmed, or simply had other plans for that night, then they wouldn't be pressured to complete the work. Now, obviously, I don't believe in making homework extra credit with my teaching background, but since Isaiah took the time to write to me, and I think it's valuable that I share his thoughts and the student perspective with everyone here tonight. Homework has been brought up, as I said, a few times, and so for Isaiah, I wanted to bring it up again tonight on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee?
Yeah, a follow-up on Betty. Actually, the city of Torrance was, I think, the only city to pass a resolution against the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. It's one of the things that the city is quite proud of. It is brought up from time to time, and I think it's it kind of ties into something else I was going to say. Had kind of an interesting 10 days to 2 weeks. My father-in-law, who was extremely important to my family since it was their step-grandfather, passed away in the last couple of weeks, and thank everybody for the nice notes and the flowers and those kinds of things. And then on the heels of that, somebody who was kind of a surrogate father, mentor, Ken Miller, who was the mayor of Torrance from 1970 to 1978, and actually on the council from 1962 to 1970, and was actually born in 1922 at the corner of El Prado and Satori in those apartments, because Torrance Memorial Hospital hadn't been built yet. And graduated from Torrance High School in 1941, and I was sitting here, probably not a huge deal, but kind of working on some stuff with thinking about Ken, and I got to thinking about, this is a man who basically lived in Torrance his entire life. So for us, Burt Lynn is a school. Sam Levy is a school. Post Avenue is a street. To him, those were all his friends. Those are the people, literally Sam Levy lived next door to him when he lived in the El Prado apartments. Burt Lynn and, and those kinds of people were real to him. Burt Lynn was on the planning commission, on the city and the school board. And he would tell stories about these people, Evelyn Carr, getting the school district going and those kinds of things. And he was mayor when we figured out how to do Columbia Park with the county. And he was the mayor when they made a deal with Charles Wilson to get Charles Wilson Park. He worked with D. Hardison to get Sur La Brea done. And and even his council, I looked at it yesterday, his council included himself, Katie Geiser, Jim Armstrong, and then he actually sold D. Hardison her house. So, he lived a wonderful, long life. I mean, we could all sit here and root to get to 97. But for somebody who, certainly to me, taught me how to act in the community and what was important. And I think from the mentor standpoint of that, there's something to be learned from all of us, because we're in positions where we can mentor people to be active in the community. I'm not sure that, I kind of have been reflective and not sure that I've done as much as I should have, but it's maybe something that maybe we all should think about more. If you see that young guy, I met Ken when I was 25 years old on the Chamber of Commerce board and didn't know a soul. And I went to school with one of his sons, so I kind of knew who he was. But, he took an interest in me. There's no reason. I was just a 25-year-old kid. But I think all of us, certainly I can tell millennial jokes all day long, but, to find those people that want to be involved, because we need to think about who follows us. And that's really what that's about. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, nice reflections. Thank you. And Mr. Hun?
Just two things. On Friday, Terry and I was able to go to the Hands Across campus at Torrance High School to celebrate MLK. And it's always one of my favorite events every year, just to see the diversity and the celebration of life. And I think that as a district, that we don't forget that somebody once said that, you don't have unity without you and I, right? And someone else said that you and I tie is what unity is, right? I know that's all cheesy and all, but that's the reality of it. And I think that we need to be able to celebrate the diversity of our city and our district, to celebrate, the unique people that, our districts are made up of. When I look at the dashboard, it's wonderful to see, Islanders and, Afro-American, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, and it's wonderful. And I think that, I hope that everyone out there can celebrate that, especially in a year of election where there's so much dissension and, division. I hope that we can look beyond that and really see and give each other benefit of the doubt and really learn to kind of come together. And so especially in the spirit of MLK that weekend, especially next month, there's Afro-American History Month recognition of as well. And so just kind of keep that in mind, that we all have a seat at the table. And I think that's the important thing, is that unless you're a minority, you don't know what that means to have a seat at the table. I'm learning that as an Asian American, to come and speak now. Like, as Asians, we're so passive and quiet, but I'm learning to find my voice in the spirit of MLK, because that kind of spirit gives me that power to give that voice out. And so that's what I'm appreciative in that way. Second of all is, I'm not sure if Jordan meant what he talked about, the assembly, but February 12th is West Hall's vaping hall. That day, February 12th, is West High's vape hall town meeting. So that's the same thing that Jordan was talking about, addiction?
It's the same keynote speaker.
Okay.
But he's actually coming twice. He's going to do daytime assemblies for kids, and then the vaping event keynote speaker on February 12th in the evening.
So I just want to make sure that was clear. I wasn't sure that was the same event. That's why I was kind of confused.
That's good clarifying point.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing is, I think that, again, the safety issue is huge. It's funny because we talked about this whole mass communication thing, right? And we're talking about the importance of it and the implementation of it. And then we talk about the whole election thing, the voting center, right? And I felt like there seems to be a dichotomy there. There seems to be kind of like, we're talking about safety, and then, you know what, they come on, they got things, we're talking about having a sheriff. I think it's a great idea to ask to have a sheriff on the camp. I don't know. And I completely agree with Jeremy's sentiment on that. I think that our mandate is safety for our children. And I think that Betty has started this whole thing with the whole communication aspect things, and I think that we have to stick by that. I know that we want to support our county, but again, I hope that we will keep that in mind as a priority. And so just my final thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you. I do have actually a couple of items that I wanted to share too. First is the classified anniversary increments this month. There are some for 10, 15, 20, and 25 years. For 10 years of accredited service, I want to thank Lanny Crandall, Christine Sadi, Randall Scott, and Yvonne Silva. For 15 years of accredited service, Stephen Davis and Juliana Gamboa. And for 20 years of service, Brian Chrétien, is that how you say Brian's last name? Chrétien. Yeah, I thought that was wrong. And Kevin Knapp. And actually Maya Manolastis. And then 25 years of accredited service is Danielle Sibley, whom actually I knew as a parent way back when. So thank you folks for serving our students and taking care of our schools and all of the things thereof. I also wanted to mention the resolutions on this agenda. Fred Korematsu, thank you for ably discussing that, Betty. The African American History Month is February 2020. There is a resolution proclaiming February 3rd to the 7th as School Counseling Week. So thank your school counselors for helping our students and keeping them in line, as well as aware of what they need to be doing to graduate and move on into real life from Torrance Unified. And that's all I had for that. And with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment in memory of retired teacher Connie Hetty and retired teacher Margaret Jacobowski.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. What?